Imagine a private company building a technology so completely powerful that the government decides to send in elite special forces to kick down their doors and seize it by force.
Just literally raid the servers.
Exactly. Sounds like a sci-fi thriller, right? But according to some top experts, that is exactly what should happen if we don't start treating artificial intelligence like nuclear weapons.
It's a heavy thought.
It really is. So do you think AI is the next atom bomb? Drop a comment or hit reply wherever you're listening, because this is a debate you will definitely want to be part of right from the jump.
It's a premise that admittedly sounds extreme the very first time you hear it.
Oh, for sure.
But when you actually start breaking down the trajectory of advanced machine learning models and, compare it to the dawn of the atomic age, the parallels become incredibly difficult to ignore.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are thrilled you're joining us for this one because we have a massive, genuinely fascinating stack of sources to get through today.
A very dense stack, I might add.
Yeah, no kidding. We're pulling from academic literature reviews, policy briefs from the Center for a New American Security, often referred to as CNAS, and some highly provocative essays from military strategists, plus international security reports.
It's quite the reading list. It tackles some fairly heavy geopolitical theory, but it's vital stuff.
The mission for today's deep dive is to unpack this highly controversial, emerging idea that artificial intelligence should be regulated almost exactly like nuclear technology.
Down to the international inspections.
Right. We are going to explore the startling similarities, the crucial differences, and figure out what history's arms races can actually teach us about surviving the AI revolution. And to help synthesize all of this complex material, I am joined by our resident expert.
I am very glad to be here. This topic is great because it forces us to step back from the daily hype cycle of tech news,
Yeah, the endless product updates.
Exactly. And it makes us ask some of the most fundamental questions possible about technology, human control, and global security.
Okay, let's unpack this. I want to start with a very provocative essay in our sources by a strategist named Andrew Dornan.
Oh, Dornan pulls absolutely no punches here.
He really doesn't. He comes right out and attacks the current mainstream approach to AI safety. Right now, the industry relies heavily on theoretical alignment research.
Basically trying to figure out how to teach a super smart computer to share human values.
Yeah, so it doesn't turn us all into paperclips. But Dornan argues that this alignment research simply is not working fast enough to keep up with the raw capability of the newest models.
The models are just scaling too quickly.
Right. He claims that artificial general intelligence, or AGI, poses a literal existential risk to humanity. And because of that, we need a dramatic, immediate pivot toward government regulation and outright prohibition, completely mirroring the nuclear tech framework.
He makes a highly pragmatic argument regarding the sheer pace of development. Tech companies are making exponential progress, pouring billions of dollars into massive compute clusters.
Just huge data centers.
Enormous. And feeding huge data sets into systems that even their creators don't fully understand anymore. The core argument here is that private, profit-driven entities are rapidly approaching the threshold of possessing the strategic equivalent of nuclear or biological weapons.
And he makes a claim about government intervention that is so specific it feels like a movie script.
The JSOC claim?
Yeah, he says it is a virtual certainty that if a private entity, say a DeepMind or an OpenAI, secretly developed true AGI, the U.S. government would step in and take it by force.
Which is wild to think about.
He explicitly mentions the idea of JSOC, the Joint Special Operations Command, kicking down the doors of a server farm. He argues that government intervention isn't a question of if, but when, and that the moment the military decides to move in is actually the most predictable moment of existential risk we face.
The visual of special forces raiding a tech campus is striking, sure, but it serves to underscore a serious geopolitical reality. In the eyes of international strategists, sovereign governments are the only actors with the scale, the mandate, and the ultimate incentive to manage civilization-altering risks.
Because a private board of directors just can't be trusted with that.
Precisely. You can't trust a corporate board to manage a weapon of mass disruption. So if we follow this logic, what does a nuclear-style framework for AI actually look like?
Right, how do you even build that?
Well, the sources break this down into a few distinct pillars, starting with controlling the inputs.
Wait, how do you even police that? With nuclear weapons, you track uranium.
Right, a physical element.
Uranium is a physical, rare earth metal. You have to mine it, refine it, put it in a massive centrifuge. AI is built on microchips, GPs are everywhere. Are we going to put a GPS tracker on every single silicon chip that comes out of a factory?
Well, no, you wouldn't track the individual commercial chips going into someone's gaming laptop, but you would heavily monitor the advanced semiconductor supply chain at the macro level.
So tracking the big shipments.
Yes. The sources suggest we would need to highly regulate or even fully nationalize advanced cloud computing resources.
Nationalize the cloud.
Think about the scale required to train a frontier AGI model. We aren't talking about a server rack in a basement somewhere. We are talking about, right, it's much like nuclear medicine or civilian nuclear energy. It's highly beneficial, but the underlying mechanics are dangerous if repurposed. So, commercial uses of AI would be strictly defined, licensed, and constantly monitored by the government to ensure they aren't bleeding over into general, unconstrained intelligence.
Which brings us to the actual pursuit of a superintelligence. If the cloud computing infrastructure is locked down and surveyed by the state, what happens to the researchers who actually want to build AGI? Do we just stop trying to invent it?
That is the third pillar, democratic choice. Dornan argues that AGI research should be halted globally until the international community can reach a binding consensus on how to proceed.
Just a total pause.
A permanent one, potentially. He suggests making the pursuit of AGI as internationally taboo as human cloning.
Wow.
If it were ever allowed to proceed, the research would be strictly limited to state actors, governments operating under international treaties, with third-party inspectors watching every single line of code being tested.
It's a massive paradigm shift. We're talking about tearing down the culture of open-source software, academic freedom, and Silicon Valley disruption, and replacing it with something resembling the paranoia and lockdown of the Cold War nuclear complex.
It is a radical departure from how tech works today.
But to understand why sober, serious policy analysts are proposing such draconian measures, we have to look at how AI is actively changing the battlefield today.
That's where things get very real.
Our sources point out that military strategy is shifting from a quantitative arms race, measuring who has the most tanks, ships, or missiles, to a qualitative arms race.
It's about who has the smartest systems.
The real danger isn't simply the existence of AI, but the deployment of AI applications, where safe, cautious nations get aggressively outcompeted by reckless ones willing to cut corners.
What's fascinating here is the concept of the compressed decision cycle.
Tell me about that.
As modern militaries rush to integrate artificial intelligence into their command control and early warning systems, the technology is processing vast streams of battlefield data at an unprecedented superhuman speed.
Faster than any human analyst could read it.
Exactly. And while that sounds like a massive strategic advantage, it drastically reduces the amount of time human commanders have to actually process the information, debate the context, and make a life-or-death decision.
Let's bring in a highly relatable, real-world example from the corporate sector that one of our sources mentions to illustrate why this speed is so dangerous. A few years ago, Amazon tried to build an AI recruiting tool to automate their hiring.
I remember this case. It was a disaster.
They eventually had to scrap it entirely. The reason? The historical data the AI was trained on was overwhelmingly male.
So the AI learned a terrible lesson.
Right. The machine learning model independently decided that being a woman was a negative metric, and it began systematically downgrading resumes that included the word women's.
Women's chess club, women's college, that sort of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, take that exact same vulnerability, a system finding a flawed correlation in its training data, and apply it to a nuclear early warning system.
The implications are completely severe. Imagine a military AI trained on decades of peacetime satellite imagery and conventional skirmishes.
Okay.
Suddenly, during a tense geopolitical standoff, it detects an anomalous troop movement or a bizarre radar reflection. Because its training data completely lacks the nuanced human context of diplomatic bluffing or grandstanding, the AI flags it as an imminent first strike attack.
It just sees the pattern and reacts.
And this leads directly into the psychological risk of automation bias, which is the proven tendency for humans to place excessive, unwarranted trust in automated systems, especially under stress.
If an operator is staring at a screen that's flashing red, and the AI says a missile is 3 minutes away, human nature is to believe the multi-billion-dollar machine.
Yes. In a high-pressure, high-stakes military crisis, humans will inevitably defer to the machine's judgment. Scholars warn this dynamic heavily incentivizes incredibly dangerous launch-on-warning postures.
Launch on warning.
Because if you know your enemy's AI can process target data and launch an attack in milliseconds, You simply cannot afford to wait for human verification. You have to automate your retaliation, effectively removing human diplomacy from the loop entirely.
And the texts emphasize that many of these advanced AI models operate as literal black boxes.
That's the scariest part.
Even the brilliant engineers who build the AI cannot always map out the exact neural pathway the system took to arrive at a specific conclusion. It just spits out an output.
In international geopolitics, opacity breeds deep mistrust. If rival nations know you are using black box AI for your nuclear command and control, they are going to assume the absolute worst.
They'll think it's rigged to fire.
They will assume you have hidden, automated trigger mechanisms that they can't predict. That mutual suspicion becomes a feedback loop, accelerating the arms race as everyone rushes to build faster, more autonomous counter-AI systems just to keep pace with the perceived threat.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. If the risks of deployment are this volatile, how do we actually govern it on a global scale?
That is the trillion-dollar question.
Several of the policy briefs in our stack outline proposed international institutions to manage this exact threat. The most prominent proposal is the creation of an International AI Agency, or IAIA,
Essentially, they want to build an IAEA for AI.
modeled directly after the International Atomic Energy Agency, which was established back in 1957 to monitor nuclear proliferation. The proposed IAIA would be tasked with three massive responsibilities.
Let's hear them.
First, developing universal safeguard standards for any frontier AI models. Second, conducting physical monitoring and inspections. And third, promoting access and benefit sharing.
Ensuring that the peaceful, medical, and scientific advancements of AI are distributed globally.
Right, so developing nations aren't left behind in a new digital dark age. But let's be real for a second. I can understand inspecting a nuclear facility. You look for centrifuges, you measure radiation. What does an AI audit actually look like?
That's a huge challenge.
Authoritarian regimes are not going to let UN inspectors sit down at their keyboards and comb through their proprietary source code.
That is the main logistical hurdle, which is why the sources suggest tracking the physical infrastructure rather than the software itself.
Back to the data centers.
Exactly. To give this proposed agency actual enforcement power, the policy brief suggests backing it up with a secure chips agreement. You can think of this as the AI equivalent of the NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty.
Okay, how would that work?
Under this agreement, countries would be completely barred from importing state-of-the-art AI microchips unless they had a fully functional IAIA-certified regulatory regime in place.
And they index this using something called a compute threshold. The sources mention a limit of 10 to the 26th FLOP's floating point operations.
It's a highly abstract number.
It is, but to physically picture it, imagine tens of thousands of the most advanced GPUs on the market, wired together in a warehouse the size of an aircraft carrier,
Running at maximum capacity for months.
requiring massive industrial cooling towers just to keep from melting down. That physical footprint is what you track. That amount of computing power becomes the AI equivalent of possessing a significant quantity of weapons-grade uranium.
It creates a quantifiable physical choke point for regulation. However, we have to provide a necessary reality check here.
Please do.
Many of the academic scholars in our source stack heavily criticize this entire nuclear analogy. While tracking giant data centers sounds plausible in theory, the fundamental nature of the technologies diverges wildly.
They aren't the same thing at all.
Nuclear weapons are physical objects. The infrastructure to refine uranium has historically been a massive state-run monopoly.
Whereas AI is just math and code. It's intangible.
It is decentralized, it is highly iterative, and crucially, it is currently entirely dominated by private corporations, not state militaries.
Right, Google and Microsoft aren't the Pentagon.
Furthermore, there is a profound historical divergence regarding public perception. The original IAEA was formed after the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
The world saw what the bomb could do.
The entire world had witnessed the unmistakable, horrific reality of atomic weapons firsthand. There was an immediate, visceral, global consensus that this specific technology needed to be controlled to prevent the end of the world.
And we haven't had a Hiroshima moment for AI. As the texts point out, even the top experts in the field are still fiercely debating the timeline, the severity, and the basic nature of the risks.
It's all theoretical right now.
Some researchers think true AGI is 3 years away. Others think we won't see it for a century.
Without a shared, undeniable consensus on the physical danger, convincing sovereign, rival nations to agree to intrusive international inspections of their most lucrative, economy-driving tech companies is a near impossible diplomatic hurdle.
So if the nuclear analogy isn't a perfect one-to-one fit, what can the history of arms control teach us? Let's bring in that CNAS report.
That report is incredibly insightful.
They did a deep dive into why some international weapons bans succeed brilliantly, while others fall apart before the ink is even dry.
Hmm.
For example, the 1995 international ban on permanently blinding laser weapons has been highly successful.
Nobody uses them.
But early 20th century attempts to ban unrestricted submarine warfare totally collapsed the moment World War II started. Why the difference?
The CNAS report breaks this down into two fundamental variables: desirability and feasibility. Desirability is essentially a grim military calculus.
How so?
States weigh the unique tactical value of a weapon against its perceived horribleness. Does it cause unnecessary suffering, or does it cause wildly indiscriminate damage to civilians?
With blinding lasers, the military value is relatively low. You could accomplish the same tactical goal with conventional weapons, but the lasers caused horrific, permanent damage to soldiers that required lifelong medical care.
It was desirable to ban them.
But submarines offered way too much of a unique, stealthy, strategic advantage for nations to ever give up, regardless of how many civilian merchant ships were sunk.
Exactly. The tactical edge outweighed the moral cost. Then you have the second variable, feasibility. Even if a ban is desirable, can you actually enforce it?
Right.
Can you clearly define the limits of the agreement? Can states actually comply with it during the fog of war? Can you verify that your adversary isn't secretly building the weapon in a hidden bunker? Arms control only succeeds when both desirability and feasibility are remarkably high.
Which brings us back to our current predicament with AI. The feasibility of verifying an AI ban is incredibly tough because the technology is dual-use software.
A model that cures disease could also engineer a pathogen.
But there's another historical warning in our sources that I think is critical. The Baruch Plan of 1946. This was a radical proposal introduced at the United Nations right after World War II to internationalize all atomic energy.
It would have forced the United States to hand over all its nuclear knowledge and materials to an international authority.
It was driven by the sheer existential terror of the post-war period. But it ultimately failed, and the reasons why are incredibly relevant to the current AI landscape.
It failed spectacularly. And looking at the text, the underlying reasons are fascinating. The sources show that while these grand utopian governance schemes get a lot of enthusiastic lip service during a crisis, they collapse under the weight of geopolitical reality.
They always do.
The Baruch Plan fell apart due to extreme paranoia, deep concerns over national sovereignty, and excessive secrecy.
The Soviets hated it.
The Soviet Union viewed the plan as a Trojan horse for the U.S. to lock in its nuclear monopoly and inspect Soviet territory. Think about how that translates to the U.S. and China today.
Neither nation is going to hand over the keys to their most powerful economic and military engine to an international committee. It's a huge cautionary tale.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the academic literature provides one more crucial historical lesson, drawing heavily on the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Oh, this is a great point.
When you study the crisis, the true danger wasn't just the physical existence of the nuclear warheads in Cuba.
It was the exhausted people operating the systems. It was the Soviet submarine captain who thought World War III had already started because his radio was out and he was ready to launch a nuclear torpedo.
Precisely. The closest we ever came to annihilation was driven by human psychology, poor communication, misaligned incentives, and severe organizational pathologies.
The human element.
The vital lesson for AI safety is that preventing an existential catastrophe is not merely a technical alignment problem. You cannot simply write a clever piece of code that makes an AI safe and then walk away.
It's not a set it and forget it situation.
You have to cultivate a deep, sustained focus on the organizational safety culture of the private companies and the military bureaucracies that are deploying these systems. We have seen in other industries like commercial aviation or the financial sector that if there are massive financial or strategic incentives to rush a product to market and cut corners on safety testing, even the most robust technical safeguards will eventually fail due to human negligence.
So what does this all mean? We've covered a massive amount of conceptual ground today. You've seen that the nuclear analogy might not be a perfect fit. AI is digital, it's diffuse, it's intangible, and it is driven by Silicon Valley corporations rather than Pentagon generals.
You simply cannot count gigabytes the same way you weigh enriched uranium.
But despite those mechanical flaws, The nuclear framework provides a truly vital analytical lens. It forces policymakers to think seriously about global existential risks.
And it gives us a starting point.
It provides us with an established vocabulary for arms control, non-proliferation, and the critical, non-negotiable need to keep human judgment and human empathy in the loop, especially as our decision cycles become dangerously compressed.
It's a historical framework that forces us to take the threat seriously, rather than just treating it as the next tech fad.
Which brings me back to you, listening right now. Think about that opening scenario. Is tracking the global supply of microchips really the same as tracking uranium? Do you think a government should have the legal authority to seize a superintelligence from a private company? Let us know what you think in the comments.
Before we go, I want to leave you with one final fascinating concept from the academic literature review in our sources.
Let's hear it.
It is a thought experiment that turns decades of Cold War strategy completely on its head. During the Cold War, the fragile peace between the superpowers was maintained by mad mutual assured destruction.
Right.
That was the absolute certainty that a first strike would result in the total annihilation of both sides. It was deterrence through guaranteed perfect execution of violence.
As long as the missiles worked, nobody would fire them.
But for the future of AI warfare, scholars have proposed a very different acronym, MAM. Mutual Assured AI Malfunction.
Mutual Assured AI Malfunction. That sounds terrifying, but how does that actually prevent a war?
In the near future, rival nations will likely have their critical foundational infrastructures, their stock markets, their power grids, their military logistics, their healthcare systems deeply interconnected and entirely reliant on highly complex, opaque AI systems.
Okay, they're all wired in.
Mailman suggests a scenario where these nations are mutually vulnerable to attacks targeting this shared digital infrastructure.
So instead of fearing a blinding nuclear flash, you're fearing a total algorithmic collapse where nothing in your country works anymore.
Exactly. Could a state of MAME actually serve as a bizarre new form of digital deterrence? It's a chilling, paradoxical thought. Could the sheer unreliability, the shared vulnerability, and the unpredictable, cascading failures of a weaponized AI collapse be the very thing that prevents us from ever using it against each other?
That is an absolutely mind-bending idea to end on. Could the shared unreliability of our own creations be the only thing that saves us from ourselves? We will leave you with that thought to mull over. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning, keep learning, and we'll see you next time.